Hi, everybody. Let me know if you can hear me and if I'm with you okay. Give me the old heads up as usual. I'm delighted to be joined by Last True Gael tonight. We're just going to chat away really about coronavirus. I mentioned I shouldn't have said that for the algorithm. But anyway, thanks for joining me, Last True Gael. Cheers.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Nice one. So you've been, I suppose, actually, I'm just going to do a bit of housekeeping to start with for the lads watching. So just for those who don't know, 325 new cases of the pandemic today, bringing it to a total of 3,235. This is in the Republic. 17 new deaths, unfortunately, bringing that to a total of 71. And I couldn't find the Northern Ireland cases, or maybe I kind of could, but anyway, you can look those up. So you've been mapping this, Last True Gael, in the last while, like, because I was looking at your thread tonight. I'm going to show the audience now, actually. Or when did you begin mapping this? Was this before it kind of broke out in Ireland?
So I kind of started taking a look at this a bit because I actually know someone who is in not the Wuhan area, but the Beijing kind of area. And basically this started like you had footage on WeChat of like lads being sealed into houses and people dropping unconscious in the middle of the street. And I think a lot of people have seen those videos anyway, like, but I remember just seeing that and I just kind of thought like this looks pretty bad, like, and because of the kind of contact I had there as well, I just started reading into it more and more and more. And I suppose maybe it's just kind of a cynical thing there, like, but thinking of how our HSE was able to deal with something like this, you wouldn't have much confidence anyway, like, and
yeah, of course,
that kind of just got me. I think I've been doing this for the past like maybe 2 weeks, and I think the reason I was doing it for the past 2 weeks is just like at the start, like, you get a small kind of dribble of cases, like 1 case, 4 cases, and then it just kind of spikes up and down, so there's a bit of noise. But then you end up in a situation where there's kind of a more constant pattern. So I think for the past couple of days, I actually have my Excel thing I have open right now. Is that
I have it. Oh, go on.
Oh yeah, sorry. So like the past couple of days, you've had like 11%, 11%, 8%, 14%, and that was a drop down from around the 18 to 24% before that. So it's been very it's kind of settled into a pattern. But one of the strange things about that pattern is we've been stuck on between about 200 and 325 as of today cases, which is, it's unusual. It's a trend I haven't seen in any of the other European countries, because like if you take a look at Italy, like Italy's case rate and their death rate has been going up, very, very kind of consistently, exponentially, because Italy have just been testing a lot of people, whereas us, like, we've just been stuck between 200 and 300 like consistently, and it's weird.
And we changed our definition. I know a few lads who were due to be tested, and they basically made the definition more stringent, so people had their tests cancelled and stuff like that. One thing I did notice is New York had for a while was having a steady kind of 5,000 cases. Now today they have 8,470, which is a jump. But for a while there was this kind of steady it was lingering around there, and I feel like that must have been just a kind of upper testing limit that they had, whether self-imposed or not. Maybe that's it in Ireland too. They're just testing whatever amount of people will get you to about 300, and it's not going to go much higher. I wonder about that, but I just want to go back to your posting on this. So I'm looking at the graph now, and the audience can see it too, that you've predicted it pretty accurately. Is this the same model that you started about 2 weeks ago? It's not like, have you been tinkering with it as you've went and readjusting it, or is it just going off your original prediction?
Yeah, no, they're tinkering it as it's going along, because like I actually I did a video, I think about almost a month ago at this stage, and was talking about like why the ICU system is going to collapse in a few weeks. And what I just did there is I just took an average growth rate, because the thing is with these things, like, you have like lockdowns, you have the government telling people what to do, and the curve is just going to flatten all over the place. And I actually think that I actually think that the when Leo Varadkar came out and said that, like, we could have 15,000 cases by the end of the month. He was assuming you had an exponent of like 1.3, I think, which is, it was never going to hit that, especially if you had a plan for like lockdowns and putting people in their houses. So it kind of felt a bit spinny because I was, just like even just on the old Facebook or on Twitter, like, there are a lot of people going, oh, it's great. They've done a great job because we only have like 3,000 cases, but as opposed to 15,
You've been so you did a thread just a while ago. It's an hour old now, and I'm just kind of reading it, and I can never take things in when I'm streaming. What was the essence of this thread? I'm rolling it past the audience here; they can be reading it and stuff too. So you're looking at the death rate. You're comparing it to Italy, Spain, and Germany. What was the kind of point you're making here in this thread? Just tonight.
So the main thing is that, like, if you take a look at the second one there, you have like the amount of cases added every day has been consistently between 200 and 300. Yet if you take a look at the Italy, Spain, German data, the amount of cases, the new cases added every day has been going up quite exponentially, whereas we've been going quite fast.
And they've had lockdowns as well. So it can't just be ascribed to the fact that we have a really good lockdown, can it? Do you think? You know what I mean? Because that's what they would say.
I mean, like, feckin' like the planes are still, I mean, the airport's still open, like,
Cheltenham, all that.
Cheltenham, the Ireland Italy rugby game, like there's just a load of things like that I don't think we're doing a particularly incredible lockdown. We did come at, I think we did come at this kind of early enough, but like still though, it's like I don't buy that. I think it's more like they have a massive backlog to test. They have a limited amount to test. They test so and such amount of people every day, and that springs up a kind of a mean or a median figure of 250, and then sometimes it's a bit more depending on your sample, and sometimes a little bit less. But as a result, they're kind of going, oh, like we have between 200 and 300 cases every day. But the reality is probably a lot higher.
I'm seeing it like from both sides, I suppose you could say. From the establishment side, they kind of talk about basically like Leo gave the figures for worst case scenario and then did a lockdown, and it's like, oh, it's much better. Well, that's obvious. I've heard it too from the people who are, shall we say, skeptical, call them conspiracy theorists, call them skeptics, whatever, kind of pointing to these sources that are like, because I've had people barraging me with these arguments. And so a lot of these arguments tend to come down to, it was expected to be this certain death rate or case rate, and now the case rate is in line with the flu or whatever, it happens to be. And I'm going, well, there's obviously a massive lockdown. People aren't leaving their houses, right? I mean, we'd have to see what the flu rate would be like in that context as well. It's just a false comparison to do that, like whether it's Leo or whether it's David Icke.
Exactly, yeah.
I just want to have a look at can you see the screen there as well, just so you're in on this as well?
Oh yeah,
you can see my screen, can you? Yeah, I just want to have a look at the case rates and stuff, like where are we at globally now? And I know there's a limit to how much this matters, because it's that's the United States. So the world, okay, so the US now has 180,000 new cases. France is number 2 in new cases, actually. That's interesting. So France is coming up on there. And Italy's case rate, I'm sure you've seen this, their case rate has gone down to 4,000, but their death rate is still very high, 837.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll see how it all pans out. I suppose I'll get straight into it. I've been thinking a lot about this Keith Woods video he did recently on post-truth nationalism. And I actually didn't do a video last night because I said I would come on every night, no matter what, even if I had nothing to say. And I actually sat where I am now, kind of torn between doing a video on like one thing or addressing kind of Keith's point. And I was just so demoralized. It's so this kind of jumping into what it is to even know something and epistemology, and it's kind of divisive as well. Between people who have different takes on this virus.
Yeah.
And I didn't get into it because it's so complicated and convoluted. What did you make of his general take there?
Well, I mean, like it is kind of true in that, like, you are ending up in a position whereby I think a lot of people are ending up in this kind of nationalist group just as a sort of a pure anti-establishment for the sake of anti-establishment, rather than trying to work out what exactly the hell is going on. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of noticed, for example, that like, you know, when I think a lot of us were talking about that this was a threat in like January, early February, you know, a lot of kind of people in that what he calls a post-truth nationalist, you know, they would have been kind of on our side a bit. But now that like people have kind of figured out a bit more that this actually is a threat and it could potentially collapse the whole health system, and it's become more an establishment thing, I suppose, then these people
Yeah.
have just turned it into, you know, it's a hoax. Now, I mean, the reasons for that are interesting. I don't know, like maybe some of them are kind of like, maybe it's kind of a low level panic, or maybe it's just kind of a status thing in your own head. But it is infuriating, especially when you kind of see these clips of like or these Twitter things of like nurses talking about like how horrible it is, or even like I know someone who has it, like, and the person who had it said that like it was the worst sickness he had of his life. Like, you know, this isn't
Yeah.
this is a very, very real thing. Like,
Yeah, see, my thing is, I've been stuck on it, is that I kind of generally believe it to be a health crisis and all of that. And
yeah,
then the reason it, like I said, I was kind of a bit demoralized last night, or just kind of, I don't know what the word is. I just couldn't be bothered. I was like, I just shut off the computer. I was like, whatever, I've had, because I was thinking about it all evening, and I had been actually for weeks, because I did a 2-hour video on this, unprepared. It was rambly on my behalf. So it's like I can't, you know, it's hard to get the head around. But there's, and sorry, the reason for that my experience last night is because I'm like, do I come on and just talk about the skepticism of the virus, or do I just come on and talk about the virus as is? Like, if you take it as it is and talk about it in that sense, I either talk about it in that way, or you talk about it in the way that it's an authoritarian threat because of you know, it's overblown and the government are using it, or do I take the more kind of radical conspiracy theories and deal with them, and I either agree with them or I try to untangle them. But if you try to untangle the million conspiracy theories you're getting given to you on this, because they're not all the same, you're like,
oh yeah,
you know, it's like trying to find the frame to even think about anything in a coherent and sane way. And someone, a person who's a skeptic could say, oh, well, Garrow, that's just a cope. You just want to have a simplistic worldview. It's not so much that. It's just that in anything in life, you need to kind of just say, okay, and I'm even finding it hard to express myself now. And I'm usually not like this. I just find myself going like, you know, do I come on every night and like, do I want to come on and talk about the coronavirus and the real world implications and all of this stuff that's going on, or do I come on every night and address every bit of skepticism that there is about it? And why would I do that? Do you know what I mean?
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, like it's like that. Morgoth actually did a good video. He kind of compared it to kind of all these. I think he was filming like the base of a tree on all these kind of roots. And he was just talking
Hmm.
about like the amount of complexity and things kind of intertwining with each other, and how hard it is to kind of interpret what's going on. I mean, a lot of this is like simply I don't know. Like, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
like even like I'm I've seen some of Cullen and John Waters talking about this
Hmm.
before, and that stuff I don't mind. Like, that's just kind of rational A to B to Z. This might be overblown because if you take a look at this figure and that figure, I have no problem with that. And
Hmm.
in a sense, I'm kind of veering a little bit more towards that side, and that I do think it's a health crisis, but there's a lot of repercussions from this. You know, like people's declining mental health,
Hmm.
the economy imploding, a bunch of authoritarian powers written in that are, you know, I mean, like, are those exactly going to be gotten rid of when this all clears up? Like, I'm not entirely sure, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
even
but
like,
it's kind of an interesting question of narrative and stuff as well. Like, because for example, let's say Dave Cullen and John, that's a point of view I respect, and you know, like I say, I respect it, and I can also, it's a point of view. It's actually an argument, as opposed to this kind of completely, like John said, he was vacillating on it. He meant he was vacillating on in a normal sense, but other people vacillate from, for example, it's just the level to which like the person who's advancing the theory onto you is advancing a million different theories, and they chop and change as you're speaking about it. So you're like, how am I meant to deal with this? But like, I can, what was my point? Is that I can deal with that because they have a point of view. But even for Dave or John, and they have their point of view, they're let's say they've locked in more on the it's a threat, it's maybe overblown. They could easily ignore that and focus on the details of the virus in a frame of it being real and it being a threat to people's lives, and both would be equally kind of true in a way. You know what I mean? You could look at it either way. You could focus on it either way, and it's hard to do all of them at the same time because it's hard to look at it seriously and try to analyze it while also entertaining the fact that it's a complete grasp for power and that it's it's overblown. And then if you introduce, 5G and all this stuff on top of it, how are you even meant to think about anything? The thing Keith's video raised for me, and it's thoughts I've been having, is something about epistemology. It's just like, and he's right, is this question of like, how can we even know what's real and talk about it in any coherent way? I'll just give you an example I had recently, is that I brought up the Italian death rate. That was my kind of sticking point. I was saying if the Italian death rate in Bergamo and Lombardy, etc., is 10, 15, 20 times higher than normal in an overall death rate, for the theorists on this, I can't deal with every link you send me and every little thing you find. I'm going to give you one thing and you come back to me. And if you can like debunk that or explain that away, then I suppose I can really engage with the possibility that it's like fake or whatever. And a guy came back to me and said, I would have to prove, I think you know this, I said this elsewhere.
Yeah.
That I would have to prove that these obituaries and death statistics from multiple different sources are not some kind of hoax. But meanwhile, the same guy is linking me articles from, I don't know, the Telegraph, maybe some scientist from Oxford saying that it's actually not as much of a big deal. And I'm going, well, if you can't take my thing about like Italian obituaries, then how the hell do you know your source makes sense? It is a thing of like losing all grasp on objective reality and a discourse that two people can actually engage in, and you're left just in crazy land.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and even in terms, I mean, well, even in terms of those kind of numbers, one even kind of good way to approach something like that is you can kind of go like, well, you're not exactly going to fake an obituary. You're not going to fake deaths. You're not going to fake ICU numbers because you're just going to have your doctors and your nurses flipping out. Like, whereas if you get like a blog that a random kind of lad wrote, or even that paper, that Oxford one, at the end of the day, that's written in a quick amount of time by a bunch of academics.
And that's the thing. You have that Oxford one says one thing, and then you have this, let's say Cambridge says another thing. And that's not surprising because with modeling and all of that, you will get different people saying different things, and it's worth wrapping your head around them. But the reason I went for the Italian death rate is just to say, listen, here's one thing. And then that argument goes on. Maybe it was 5G, maybe it was the fact that they're old, blah, 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 blah. And then I go, okay, well, do it for Spain as well and New York. And in a way, I'm kind of making the mistake here tonight because every time I want to come on and talk about the difficulty in having this conversation, I end up going back to prove it, arguing whether it was 5G or whatever in Italy. And I'm like, I almost want to say to the audience and the people who are talking to me about that, and it could seem like a cope or a rage quit on my behalf, possibly, but it's like, listen, I don't want to talk about that anymore. And it's not like intellectual cowardice, because it's like, no, I want you to come to me on an epistemological level playing field. And if that's the case, then I'd have a conversation. But if it can't be that, then I don't want to hear about it anymore. It sounds like a tantrum on my behalf or something, but it's just, you get so much of it. And my starting position is to always take things on good faith. And when you do that, you become worn down very quickly by it. Again, the way I see it is that it's like, for the person who's a hardcore theorist, you're based on like the Italian death thing and lots of other things, is that any source you have is discounted and any source they have counts. And that's just a stupid way to talk about anything. It doesn't make any sense. And, for people who are saying it's this and it's that, I kind of don't want to talk about it. You come to me with some coherent thing, address my point, and I'd talk about it. But otherwise, I'm going to plow on kind of in the discourse that I've established as most likely to be true. And until you can come along properly and challenge that in some way and have a coherent, I'm rambling, sorry about this, but until you can come to me, one is to agree on an epistemological reality. So I don't just want to take anything. It has to be something, we have to agree on what can be true or whatever, what we agree on is true. And then the other thing is you have to decide what your theory is, because my theory is more or less that it's a health crisis. I don't know how the virus got out, but it did. It's a health crisis, and the only variable is whether or not the government is overreacting, and they will abuse this as a, to get power. So that's the Dave Cullen, John Waters vibe. That's the variable I can have a conversation on, and I have to just kind of close the door to the rest, because I've given it a week or so. And I've just kind of been bullshitted left, right, and center. So I have to just close that door and go, this is the confines of the conversation now. Otherwise, I go insane, because you just can't keep going like that. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, that there is a lot of to that. Like, I mean, even like, I have been kind of seeing this trend in that kind of cohort of people a little bit, and I can just see this play out again and again and again and again. I mean, we're seeing this with the virus, but even like, you could have a group of these kind of those kind of post-truth nationalists, to use Keith Woods' phrase, and they can agree with something today, but because they're just so firmly rooted in being that anti-establishment guy, that that's their whole identity. That's how they kind of define themselves in relation to society. Then this is just going to keep continuing over and over and over again. I mean, like, if you had someone who kind of maybe said that, like, well, 5G was a conspiracy, it was as bad as everyone said it would. These people would say, "Oh no, that's a conspiracy. They're just saying that to shut us up." This pattern I can just see going again and again and again.
Yeah, and it's like, again, we risk falling into the trap where we start to actually have a debate about 5G, and it's like, look, 5G, I'm not denying it. Here's my take on it: is that I'm not being pro 5G, or I'm not being dismissing them or saying whatever. I'm just saying I'm not interested in that. And you could call me for a proponent of and whether it's that or whether it's other issues that are kind of up in the air a bit. It's more, so it's not me saying I think 5G is fine or something. It's just me saying I have a limited amount of things I'm interested in, and that doesn't present itself. Basically, I don't care. It's kind of like that. And they could say, "Oh, well, you're very shut off. I thought you were intellectually curious." But it's like, well, if I have to be intellectually curious about 5G the way you want me to be, even though you're not giving me what I need on it, then I have to be the same about a million other things. And the issue I have about them as well is that those million other things, those other issues, so whether it's whatever, you know what I mean? And I'm not like pro-vaccine or anything, but just whatever, all that whole host of issues, you could name dozens of them. My issue is that they all follow the same narrative, and problem, solution, dulling down the mind of the masses and all this. And I go, it's just too like straightforward to me that everything follows that. It seems like that person is down that rabbit hole completely. And again, I can't argue with them. So if I did go down the route of arguing on one of those things and I took an oppositional point of view, we'd be back to Italian deaths are faked, but yet they can give you a link that says something in favor of their worldview, and theirs counts and yours doesn't. It's just like, listen, if you want to be off there where every situation follows the same narrative thread, just be off there. I'm a nationalist. I care about a certain amount of things, and I am open to new things if you can tell me in 30 seconds. And those things are on an epistemological framework that matches mine, which I think is reasonable. If you can't, then just don't argue with me about it, like, in a way. But there's more to I'm fanboying on Keith here a bit, because I just thought, I don't think everyone would agree with him on this, but it's a very profound thing he did with putting those ideas together and putting it out there. He's kind of there are features to some of this stuff, anywhere from the libertarianism to the conspiracy stuff, which is kind of like, he suggested that they're kind of anti-state, and and sorry again, everybody, forgive me, I'm rambling. I know I should be hearing you more because you're on, but we must do this again, and I'll shut up more. But it's that like basically he said that they're anti-state, and that's at the core of it. And so people who are afraid of the state taking advantage of this virus thing, that is fundamentally flawed from a nationalist point of view, you know, this anti-state thing. And I went on with him on Paddy's Day, and I brought up the fact that, you know, it's not a matter of being necessarily anti-state, it's anti the state as it is. You know, you might be pro-state and pro-authoritarianism even, but you could just say, well, like we're talking Leo Varadkar here, we're talking Fine Gael, we're talking whatever, right? But he's made arguments that, you know, I could be mischaracterizing him here, but I think it goes that, like, it's not just that some of these people are anti-state as it is, like, oh, we're just against this state because it's bad. Some of them are genuinely anti-state. And to me, that's a problem because I'm not. You know, I could imagine a nationalist, say nationalists came to power and formed a strong state. I can imagine these people who are currently bedfellows with nationalists, i.e. the conspiracy people, suddenly turning, and actually the core of it is the conspiracy stuff. The core of it is the problem solution. They're trying to dumb us down. I think that's the first thing for them, and the nationalism that they dabble with is kind of secondary. And I think it would prove to be the case at all going forward. You would see that anytime it gets a chance to make its decision. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Like the sense that like kind of nationalism is kind of used as sort of a kind of an almost rudimentary, well, maybe not that's the wrong word, but kind of arbitrary component of your identity, and that nationalism right now is kind of being used as that opposition to the state itself. Whereas if you've got a nationalist government, that you don't, that kind of nationalist component becomes more, well, you don't need it anymore, so you kind of adopt something else.
And it's just a strange type of bedfellowness as well, if that's a word, because it's like, I think the reason I think it matters now, and it's never come up before, is that this has kind of made it clear. And I'm not a divisive person. I think people can get along or whatever. I am just hashing out the ideas here. No one's, I'm not enemies with people over political philosophy and differences and whatever. But that doesn't mean you can't talk about them. And it's like, you do start to wonder. It's just the first time I realized, I went, right, so and this isn't attacking someone who's skeptical, like you said, brings up a number here, a number there, a theory here or whatever. That's fine. I'm talking about the overarching, everything fits this narrative conspiracy stuff. It became very clear very quickly that, and it's not just a question of political motives as well. Like it comes back to that question of what it is to know anything. And you can't, again, I'm quoting Keith here. I hope to have him on sometime to talk about this as well. If he could join us, it'd be great. But like, you know, like it's not just the political motives. It's if you can't figure out what it is to know anything, you can't have a coherent philosophy. You also can't take power. Power is a word people are afraid of, but I don't think, when I look at the conspiracy people, I'm like, what would it look like if you were to take power? And power seems like a big evil thing, just for anyone in the chat who's scared of power or something. Power is the opposite of powerlessness, right? Power, the modern word for power is empowerment, if you want to use a friendly way of putting it. It's like saying awareness raising instead of propaganda, right? It's nothing wrong with it. Power, empowerment. For the conspiracy people, I'm like, what does it look like for you to have power? And it almost seems to me like at the core of it, they're kind of allergic to it and almost wouldn't want it, which is strange to me, because it's like, well, if you believe all these things, what would you do? It's almost like, what do you people want?
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of like some of this kind of conspiracy stuff comes maybe more kind of like I'm part of this opposition. I'm part of this group that kind of just is kind of anti, like, you know, kind of anti-state, so to speak, and they wouldn't be comfortable in a position like that, because they don't intend to be in a position like that. You put them in a position like that, they wouldn't know what to do. They just be kind of stuck there, I suppose.
Yeah, and I see here, Pat Scanlon, I don't know what he means by this. I'm not paying overly or too much attention to the to the chat, but and I'm not no hate against this guy or anything, but just he says, have the quote big boys got to you, Garrod? Now, if he means what I think he means is that like you've been gotten to or whatever, it's like, you know, if you think what I'm saying tonight means I've been gotten to, I was always gotten to. If that's the case, this is the way I've always viewed the world, and if there's some mistake made there where that wasn't clear, then maybe this coronavirus thing just kind of made that clear. And I was just flagged my video again. But, you know, and again, this isn't me pinning, this is me not saying like the official narrative is 100% true. I defend it with my dying breath. It's not. I'm open to things on this. This is broader about, like I say, about differing kind of points of view within the same bubble, kind of realizing that, do we really want the same things? And also, do we agree on what it is to know anything, and what do we want? I think that's at the heart of it. So no, I haven't been, and that's the refrain as well. Like, is that I'm putting my point of view genuinely out there, and whether it's this whatever pat there meant or not, I could imagine other people saying it as well. He's been gotten to, he's off the train, this kind of stuff, and I'm like, well, I'm just giving a point of view honestly, and I'm kind of explaining my logic and all that. If there's this whole thing of have you been gotten to, oh, he's a shill for 5G and all this kind of stuff. It's you're back to cult. This is cult territory then. You know what I mean? Because I'm not going to say that about anybody else. If you tomorrow said, I have a different point of view to you, actually, Garrod, we're not as similar as maybe we thought we were. There's a bit of an issue there. I wouldn't say, oh, well, you've been gotten to, you are a shill, you're this or that. That's clearly cult behavior. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. Like, and even kind of like another kind of problem with this too is that it kind of like I think a kind of a big thing for us is just to kind of convince normal people, or, you know, get them on our side, or even like I'll give an example. You know, this whole George Soros thing. I think you did a video. You went on what's that website? The Benefax one, the NGO website, and I think you got a kind of you went into one of their accounts and you found a statement, a transfer of money from the Open Society, like, you know. That's proof that there is something there involved. But at the same time, like, if you kind of start talking like a lot of the post-truth lads are talking, you end up kind of just isolating people completely because they think you're crazy, you know. Like, I think what a lot of this, with some of this kind of stuff, is that like I sometimes like the official story is not as 100% true or as clear as it is, but the alternative that they suggest is almost always wrong.
Yeah, and
I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch. But
no, it's. I think there are cases where there's some truth to it or whatever. Like, for example, when I see, but like anything, there's always going to be, you know, a broken clock or whatever it is, or whatever the clock analogy is. I don't know, but you know, a stop clock is right twice, isn't it? Yeah. So like, and they are onto something. Very often it's kind of like, to me, it's like they might not be proving their point very well, because if they could prove it well enough, I think most people, like, honestly, I've seen with, like, you know, when you're trying to debate some kind of regime economist on whether immigration has an effect on the housing crisis, right? That is like, of course, the establishment would say you're being a conspiracy theorist, but it's like, well, when you actually get them in a corner, they'll completely block you. They will almost concede it, and naturally so, because it's actually a modest proposal. For me to say immigration, you know, it might be framed as wrong or kooky or whatever, but it's like most people would agree. Most people basically might take as like, yeah, that might be called fringe, or I have to prove my point to the regime, the establishment. But I'm confident that if you could give me 5,000 people in a room with a microphone, and you give me, and let's say the opponent, Ronan Lyons, let's say, if you give us 2 minutes on the mic each, I think I could have everybody leave that room agreeing with me. It's just a matter of like contact and connection. And I'm like, I don't think you guys could do that with some of your theories. You know what I mean? I don't know. Are you really on a basis of like full, again, it's back to epistemology, really knowing what you claim to know and being able to prove it? What was even my point again? Yeah, no, go on.
Oh, yes, sorry. No, I mean, like, some of that kind of epistemology stuff, kind of like it kind of converges in, or it kind of like, the more you can kind of see it in front of your own face, or you can't you can't plausibly cover it up, the more it kind of, in that kind of sense, it's more reliable. So even back to your kind of example there, like, I mean, the 5,000 in the room, if you were to just go to people and go, well, more people in your country means they need more places to stay, which means increased rent, more people
Yeah.
sharing a house, people go, yeah, sure, that makes sense. I see that all the time right in front of my eyes. Whereas if you had another one of these kind of post-truth lads kind of coming in and going, well, it's orchestrated by the New World Order to make everyone a consumer or whatever, they're not going to go for that one. They'll go for the first one because you can't fake the first one. People see it all the time.
And it's like sometimes a conspiracy proposal, because I think a conspiracy theory is not a derogatory term. It can be a perfectly legitimate thing. Power does conspire and all of that. But it's like, there's a difference, because it's like, well, for me to say, I don't know, something like that, like immigration makes housing worse or whatever. It's like, it's a modest proposal and it's well backed up. Whereas it's like, the alternatives are, you're giving me a very extreme proposal, and it's like, even before I back up the housing argument or someone else backs up their argument, it's like, most people, normal people to start with, let's say they're introducing this technology or that wants to fry everybody's brain. People kind of go, well, what about their brains? What about their friends' brains when they go past these things? What about all the people that would have to know about that, or whatever? And then the counter argument could just be like, well, they want to make money. Or, but it's like, again, it just, and again, I always get wrapped up in these things, getting into the specifics, and I'm afraid they will say you're closed-minded and you don't want to argue the facts and stuff. It's like, I've had a good experience of it in the last week, and with an open mind, and I've had it before. Of course, I've looked into some of these theories, said, I wonder how much there is to this, and there's a lack of. Again, it's like that housing argument. I could say, give me 1 minute and I will convince these people. I severely doubt if you gave these people 1 minute, I think everybody would be leaving the room going, maybe the guy's right, but he didn't, you know what I mean? And if you could do that, they would do it. But anyway, what was I going to say is, just this Soros stuff as well. I get a bad reek off that, just by the by, seeming as you mentioned it. It's like, again, you take it's actually a great example, because you take a legitimate nationalist issue, right? This is where the nationalist thing and the post-truth, we'll call them, people actually met on an issue, and they kind of made a baby out of it, type of thing, right? Because the Soros thing was a meme in the nationalist, shall we say, the normal nationalist for a while. Soros funds this, Soros funds Black Lives Matter, he funds all these like weird groups in Ireland and all of this stuff, immigration, whatever. So Soros was like a light kind of meme. And then the post-truth, we'll call them, people got their hands on it, and it took on the life of that conspiracy narrative, that kind of overblown thing. And you had a meme kind of transcend from normal nationalism into post-truth nationalism. And the moment that happened, I kind of wanted nothing to do with it. I'm like, I don't want to talk about Soros is at it again. It's almost like a cartoon to me.
Yeah, I mean, like you've gone from just like looking through a couple of government agencies' accounts and just tracing a couple of names back to a giant kind of boogeyman or a giant kind of supervillain almost, I mean, I'm not saying that, these things don't have an impact. They obviously do, but there is a kind of a right and wrong way of kind of phrasing it, or kind of extrapolating out, or taking a look at the impact it might have, like.
And it's the phrasing. I'm talking about the phrasing, like the way people say it and stuff. But it's like the phrasing. It's not a small thing, because you could say, "What's the big deal?" It's just the way people phrase things. But it's the way both sides, let's say, would phrase it. It represents how they're thinking about it. To me, one side is thinking about it like in this matters. This is a pattern. Whatever. The other side is turning it into a cartoon, and straight away it takes on that nature, and it just becomes unreal. And it comes back to me as just a question of, what do you want, and where are we going with this, and how are we ever meant to get anywhere with this, and do you want to get anywhere with this? I don't really think so, and I don't I want to get somewhere. You have this issue with all sorts of subcultures, and you have it with cults as well. I don't want to call them complete cultists, but subcultures is not wanting to enter the mainstream and take the reins. And I want to influencers, Irish mainstream influencers, bring a few of them in, set up a culture, And like, far be it from me. Like, if I was high agency enough to do that, I would be doing it. I'm not saying it's all about me or something. Someone far more talented or whatever. But for these movements to start happening, I really want that, and I want to be able to approach all sorts of normal people and make a case for immigration. My list of demands is pretty straightforward. I'm a normal guy. Like, to the post-truth people, I would just kind of say, listen, think of me as a blue pill guy, just like every other normie out there. I just happen to think immigration is too much, and we should have a homeland for ourselves, and we should have a hierarchy and gender and all of these. That's going to be taken the wrong way. You know what I mean? Gender roles and a bit more of a traditional thing, and not be exploited by international capital and all of these multinationals. Actually have a state. I'm sounding like Keith Woods again here, but I agree with him. Have a state that represents you, and again, not be just a consumer. A kind of a promotion of family culture again. And so, these things are pretty modest demands. And it's like, if there's a mistake been made that because I think that, and it's a little bit outside the mainstream now, that puts me into bed with every conspiracy theory you can imagine, then there's been a mistake made, because I don't. I'm a normie, a blue pill normie that has a couple of beliefs that are outside. How about you?
Yeah, no, I'd agree the same thing. Even stuff like, I mean, just kind of in relation to your kind of talking about the state or your kind of points there. Like, one of the things like that kind of I've been thinking about like, well, just is the fact that, like, you know, kind of back to a Ronan Lyons or an establishment, they always think of the economy in terms of like GDP. They think about it in this very kind of almost autistic-y kind of quant way. And I mean, there's a couple of problems with that. I mean, you have to get into stuff like maybe real wages or labor force participation rate. But the main thing is that the simple goal of the economy is that so that people can have jobs and families. That's it. And that should be the kind of focus of it. And if you start kind of like breaking things out into this kind of just very kind of numeric, you know, line goes up, line goes down, stock market goes up, ECB rate goes down. I mean, there's a bit of a place for that, obviously, but like, it's not a very, it's not, maybe a truthful way. Maybe that's kind of the wrong phrase, but like, but it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking that I think he kind of was maybe touching on a bit, especially towards the end of that video when he was talking about the four different kind of groups of rightists or people who end up there. Like he was talking about the kind of the Bronze Age pervert thing. He was talking about the kind of pursuit of truth. Catholicism as a framework, that kind of stuff. That was very interesting, actually. That was very interesting.
Well, I must have dozed off on that bit of it. I don't know. In between Strauss and thing, I sometimes I have to watch his stuff twice, right?
Yeah,
Small Brain has to watch it twice, you know. But just whatever he did say, like, so there's the Bronze Age pervert side of things, the BAP side of things. What is that characterized by? Whether be it you're reflecting, let's say, what you saw Keith say, or just your own point of view as well. What would you say that is characterized by?
Well, to be fair, I'm not actually familiar that much with BAP, so I'm just
okay. We'll go over that one. But there's the Catholic side. I kind of get what the BAP thing is. It's this. Well, I kind of do and I kind of don't. I get it myself, but I probably couldn't elaborate very well on it. There's the Catholic tradcast type of thing. And what are the other two branches? Do you remember?
Kind of working within the kind of liberal system, and truth for the sake of truth, which is kind of the pursuit of truth and what truth is, that which is more kind of Keith Woods' one.
I've been thinking about that. I mean, I don't go with that myself necessarily. Like, so there's, for example, it depends what the definition is. So I'm, this is just a conversation between us. We're not reflecting anyone else's point of view, but. So just between us, truth is like, I want to pursue truth, but this, on the other hand, you pursue truth and you become a like objective truth, and it's kind of material truth you end up at this kind of stardust. We're getting in deep into it now, but I'm not a fan of that, actually. I do enjoy a bit of mythos and a bit of whatever, and a bit of instinctual truth, above this kind of measurable microscopy stuff. which, you know, instinctual truth and handed down truth and all of that can be done via religion and other things, but just that kind of a little bit of the mystical, a little bit of whatever. So I don't know. I wouldn't fall under that bracket. I don't know. I'm just trying to think about it now. What kind of versions of the right there are? I mean, there's so many, and it's so confused. There's actually question for you, because I'm going off into my own mind here a little bit. What do you make of this China virus, China bad narrative? Are you a supporter of that, or do you think otherwise?
Yeah, to be honest, in like, you know, there's been a lot of them kind of like, you know, fucking up in terms of like being able to contain the thing and all that kind of stuff. But in a sense, I'm some little bit maybe more apathetic than I should be, because my kind of like I'm absolutely, I think everyone else or a lot of people watching this would be like they're fucking raving about the Irish government's response to this. You know, it hasn't been good at all, and I think my anger is more towards that kind of bad response rather than the actual kind of Chinese response.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm like, look,
I'm not saying the Chinese didn't mess up, like, but it's kind of like, look, it's done. We have to deal with it. We could have dealt with this very, very well, and we haven't dealt with this well at all.
Yeah, we have our own problems. Like I saw this Sarah Carey, who's this kind of regime figure, allegedly a journalist, and kind of does speaking events with every corporation in the country or in the world, basically. One of these types. Kind of like responding to a Declan Ganley tweet, being like, "Oh, China are responsible for this," you know, which to a person like her is generally outside the pale of like you're criticizing another country or another people. But yet her and Ganley were able to find common ground on that. And when I see a kind of a liberal from the right and a liberal from the left kind of coalescing on a subject, I get very suspicious, you know.
Yeah.
I do, and it was just the kind of China thing, and I'm like, listen, lads, let's just take care of our country here. Like, I know Chinese people eat rats and stuff. Some of them do. Don't ban me, YouTube. Some do. And the Chinese regime is authoritarian and covered it up. Yeah, sure they did. Like, but I mean, if we like, we have our own troubles. Like you know, there's a lot of Asian people, Chinese people living here. You know, and there'll be more and more coming if we continue our same policy. I'm more worried about that. It's like, you know, and our country being bought up left, right, and center by Chinese state corporations. That's happening all over the place. All sorts of industries and infrastructure and stuff being bought up. It's worth a lot of actually journalism on that, but that's happening. I don't want to do this kind of 15 minutes of hate on China or whatever. We've got our own problems first, like. Yeah,
no, even in relation to that question, I don't know kind of much off the top of my head, but like when you had Nama kind of doing all those fire sales of kind of assets and land back in the early 2010s, I suppose, I'd love to know like what the actual buy up of maybe Chinese in that actually is, because I do know for a fact, like I've heard people kind of talk about the fact that like they're selling a house in such an area, and then this Chinese guy, as part of a kind of a real estate investment trust, kind of comes in and just like tries to buy up the property. And I've heard that a kind of couple of times. So there does seem to be a bit of a significant Chinese stake within property or within assets within the country, but I don't know to what level or what degree.
There are big time, and I don't know the ins and outs of it fully. I've had brief kind of looks at it, but what you will see with all of this stuff is, I find in Ireland anyway, to do with big multinational capital, is there's a class of Irish people. They are doing very well for themselves, largely Dublin, D4E kind of based.
Yeah.
IFSC and all of that, all of these finance kind of instruments and little companies. And once you go down the rabbit hole, it's actually rather easy as well, because a lot of them connect to each other. And if you sometime you dedicate an hour for yourself and just say, I'm going to look around for it and follow one company into another as a subsidiary of another and do that whole rabbit hole. There's so many, you see, let's say if you're focusing on China, you'll see Chinese interests trying to exert themselves and, you know, buy things up and all of that, and have their own people come in here and all of these things. But you will see this class of Irish people raking it in off of that. All of these like companies that'll basically liaise the whole thing to go forward so it's like, what's the one, Bartra Capital, That's the one that O'Devany Gardens, they were trying to, I don't know where that stands at the moment. It was this apartment complex and there was controversy about it. Local people weren't happy or whatever. But it was the Chinese immigration visa for millionaires there. If they spend like 1 or 2 million, it's been a while since I've looked at this, they'll get this immigration visa. And then it will allow them to spend their money in return. They basically have to spend that 1 or 2 million or whatever it is on capital in Ireland.
Yeah.
And it's just so strange to me. So it's like, okay, so we give you an immigration visa, which, you know, whether they avail of it or not, doesn't matter. We sell our little chunk of the rights and our privileges to you. And in return, you get to have a stake in apartment complexes, which are basically rape instruments for people's wages. Do you know what I mean? As in, like, people go to work, Irish people go to work, they do their labor, and then they hand a disproportionate share over to someone who just happens to own it, which is a Chinese millionaire who's like 5,000-10,000 miles away, whatever it is. It's like, you know, I don't blame the Chinese millionaire there at all. I don't blame the Chinese state, but whatever, I can't use the word. It's a 4-letter word starting with T or C. Whatever C's are here on that our end, facilitating that should be, and it's a word that starts with H. They should. I mean, you know what I'm saying. Like, it's just the fact that that's happening, and it's happening so quietly. And to go back to the start, the fact that we're talking about all these distractions and all of that, you know, it is back to Keith Woods' video. In order to move forward, you need to have a kind of a coherent view of things. Not that everybody agrees on everything, but you need to settle on what it is to even know anything. And once you get all that out of the way a little bit, I think you can focus on that. There's my point is there are so many really true things that are going on that we could be focusing on. And if nationalism is always up for debate and it's anyone's guess, you have an issue there. You're distracted.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like even stuff like you've been kind of seeing and hearing about this in the UK as well. Like lads who would be they have a bit of property and they'd be just speculating on it because prices have been going on up and out over time. Yet our vacancy tax, I think, is only on about like 2 or 3%. But that's when the value of your land is going up by, I think, on average, like 12 to 15% every single year. It's, you're just going to be raking it in. I mean, like, I heard a story of like kind of Saudi Arabian guys building up apartments in the center of London, and they've no intention of selling them. Like, they're just gonna let them sit there and just wait till the land goes up and then sell it off. So it's kind of a weird thing where you're just getting people to just build this, and then you just don't open it, and then you just kind of sell it off at a later highly inflated price. It's kind of a weird way of making money. It's kind of an exploitative way,
Yeah, I have my thoughts on that too. And like, again, I'll just preface for anybody who says Garrod thinks he's the arbiter of what is a thing and what isn't. This is just my point of view. You can take it or leave it. No one's making you listen or agree with me. But the idea that like people can buy that up and take advantage of a country and be let do that, it makes me, there's so much there to get into and all that stuff. I would advocate, for me anyway, just my point of view, whatever, is this kind of post-truth stuff I can't focus on anymore. That's what I've learned from this experience. Even if some of those theories turn out to be true, the method of trying to arrive at that, I can't deal with that anymore. I don't want to, right? And I also, in a way, this kind of, to use the word racism, there's this kind of, and I notice it actually too from the same people, the kind of newbies to, let's say, nationalism, and maybe some of these post-truth people as well, this kind of thing that you just go off on immigrants. And I did, if the NGOs are listening, they'll be shocked to hear me say this because they've tried to say I'm a big, terrible hater and all this. Like, I'm not. I don't go off on these massive tirades, whatever, against immigrants. And you see it a lot, I think, with Muslims. I absorbed the counter jihad stuff, Robert Spencer, Pamela Geller, who else is there? Even some of Douglas Murray and all that kind of stuff. But you see people going wild on it, like really like bad on it. And I feel like it's not so much that I'm castigating it. It's just that it's a distraction from the fact that your country is being sold out from underneath you. And it is to do with immigration is a tool in that. And I'm against all that. And I don't like our culture being replaced and our people being replaced. But to be distracted by the man on the street, the Muslim who said his prayers in the park or whatever, or 10 of them got together and did it, and it's a little bit in your face. That stuff is really small potatoes compared to the bigger picture here. You know what I mean? And I think to me, I'm like, I don't want to be distracted by, and people will know what I mean when I say conspiracy or post-truth, and I don't want to be distracted by, call it mindless racism, or just like expressing, and it's a legitimate feeling, being angsty about the fact that what's happened going on around you. It's completely legitimate to express your angst in a way that maybe I wouldn't quite agree with. Someone in the chat is saying, "Oh, so you're a racist now, Father," or whatever. If I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not going around calling people racist. I'm using the word kind of ironically or whatever as well. Like, so people will be freaking out at me saying that, but you know what I mean? That kind of small potato stuff, squabbling with the fella down the road. It's like, there's a reason that guy is down the road in the first place. You know what I mean? And that's the bigger question to me. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, like it's kind of it's an interesting point, because I even kind of wonder about it in relation to like an example of that might be the kind of race IQ stuff. I mean, that's I kind of no problem kind of talking about that, or accepting that. But if one of the topics that kind of comes up in that kind of post-truth thing is kind of climate change, and that it's always like it's not happening at all, and kind of like keep brought up, it's like, how do you know? Like how you believe in kind of one scientific set of stuff and you don't understand it, but you believe in this one over here. And that I almost kind of felt sometimes like that for some people there is like the legitimate, like, there's a lot of backing behind it. It's been around for decades. That's fine. It's a good statistical predictor of outcomes. But I think for maybe I get that feeling it is kind of more just used as kind of a battering ram, I suppose.
You mean climate change?
No, kind of the race IQ stuff.
Oh, that. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I was thinking you were talking about climate change for a second. So it's used as a battering ram against which?
No,
just
no,
for
but
me
like
at the back here. So.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So like what I mean by that is kind of like you might have something like a lot of these those kind of people would kind of go like climate change is not happening at all, but kind of like Keith Woods is saying, what do you know about climate change? But they'll accept the whole race IQ thing, and they won't. They still won't know why that's true or why that exists. So they accept one, but they don't accept the other. And one of the reasons they might accept the race IQ stuff is because of that kind of bit of racism, basically.
It's kind of I don't know. That kind of calipers nationalism is doesn't really, it's like the science on that is whatever. It's clear enough, but or whatever, people debate it. But it's like, I don't want to me it's useful in explaining certain things. So like, for example, things being held against national groups, indigenous groups in America and in Europe and or Australia and stuff. To deny that science is to kind of puts the blame on you. That's how people use it as a defense mechanism. But I don't know, people go down all these roads, and to me the biggest thing is to challenge the structure of our societies and our economies that is all based on human beings as sacks of potatoes and nameless, numbered units, and that jives with like immigration and men and women being the same and not having roles and different things going on. It's completely antithetical to any kind of traditional or kind of a society that is set up on what you can see in front of you and what makes sense and what improves happiness and well-being and all of that stuff, especially in the modern age when we have technology that could be so much our friend if we wanted it to be. And yet, even though we're technologically improving, we're moving the opposite direction in standard of living and all of that. And that queer kind of direction we're going in, the opposite of the one we should be, to me is largely explained by society, the fabric of society, both ethnically, culturally, gender relations, family. is all done for economic reasons. And to me, it's to get to that and try to grapple with that. And here's a point I wanted to bring up a while ago, is that, you know, in order, if that is your viewpoint and you're kind of clear on that, and again, I'm not dictating, but just, you can bring so many people in on that basis. People who are kind of left, people who are kind of middle, upper class, people who are working class people, of course, right, are the most affected by all of this stuff. So, and are less kind of manipulated by kind of bourgeois discourse. So that's kind of almost a given. But if you can have a coherent worldview, you can get to the kind of the middle class, upper middle class, basically everybody. Your goal should be able to approach everybody and in a clear, persuasive way be able to get to everybody. And that I think some people think, oh, well, if you abandon, I'm calling it racism, you know, I mean it ironically, if you abandon that, then that just means you're some kind of liberal person who is like, you know, globo, multicultural and all that. It's like, it's not really. It's just, if you can kind of find a coherent way to demonstrate your point of view that isn't just lashing out, that isn't conspiracy stuff, that isn't, you can bring more people in. And until you do that, to me, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's just my point. You might see it, like, you see these, like, I don't want to name them, but you know, these like anti-woke leftists and these kind of leftists who are sick of all that stuff, and their focus is against capital. You know, they could reach us, but we would have to reach them a bit too, and we would have to let go of our kind of weird idiosyncrasies to kind of make that happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a case of like, I just kind of maybe just keeping it relatable to people, just stuff like, why aren't you able to get a house anymore? Why can't you get on the property ladder? Why is it that in previous decades, people had families and they were able to afford cars and have a kind of a more chilled out job and go to the countryside, and they didn't have to commute in an hour back and forth every day on a dart? You know, those are immediate things that kind of resonate with people, and then you start bringing the stuff on top of that.
Yeah, and there's you know, I saw someone say recently, you know, I want to see people who are my age or younger, who men with Y chromosomes or something like that, that look like the people did in my grandparents' pictures. You know, this whole thing of like mental illness and all of that stuff, and people are just so lost. You know, there is an element as well that's like beyond the material, because there's, on one end, there's the material, there's the housing and the lifestyle. Why were they able to get a house when they were young and have a family, and for, you know, these questions? But then there's the like, there is room for the more transcendent element of it. And it's not so much, I'm not talking about inventing a religion. It's just the kind of the directionlessness of society and people being, I don't know, I'm kind of going off a little bit here, but you know, there's so many elements here that are kind of normal, and you can so easily make your argument because people can see it. And I don't know, and that, I'll just raise one more thing, because I'm burning the ear off you and everybody else here, and maybe we're going too long, but God, I looked at the chat there and I got distracted. 2 seconds now, I'll gather my point. What was it? Damn. Any other thoughts?
Oh, yeah. Do you mean the kind of spiritual transcendent stuff? Is that?
No, or anything really. Go off on it there. I'm just trying to gather what I was going for, and I looked at the chat, which is my mistake.
Well, yeah, I mean, like it kind of goes maybe, I mean, into kind of a more consumerist kind of nihilistic culture, which has been. Keith has talked about some of this. I talked about this before, like as well. This guy called a writer called David Foster Wallace. If you've heard of him, he wrote this book called Infinite Jest, and he wrote this very good essay on irony, and you know, the way that, like, you know, people just make fun of anything and everything, and in the order of doing that, it's kind of hard to decipher what is real and what is not real, and also you end up kind of just deconstructing everything without offering kind of a solution to it. So so you end up getting stuff like maybe the concept of kind of something as important as nationalism turning into something like, oh, let's just, you know, bash the Brits or whatever. This kind of jokey kind of thing. And if that kind of permeates your culture, it's kind of hard to look at something more, on a kind of a more deep level, like something like nationalism, for example.
Yeah, and it is important to know what you want and be able to state what you want. Because like John Waters was speaking to me a few nights ago about the decade that's just passed of like abortion and gay marriage and all that stuff. And like the thing to ask them would be like, you want to make these changes to society, and you say you'll just rip things out, but like aside from what you want to rip out, excuse me, I don't know if that was I'll have to keep an eye on that cough, but the question is like, okay, you, the progressive, you have your measures that you want to bring in and how you want to deconstruct traditional society. What's the society you want in the next 20 years? If I gave you carte blanche for the next 30 years, go mad. What is it you actually want to bring in? What's your worldview? I think it'd be a scary thought, actually, whatever it would be. It's actually worth brainstorming on sometime, because they never really do suggest what they want. They want more financial equality.
Yeah, they always say kind of they want more equality, but that equality kind of maybe translates into them maybe getting a nice NGO job with 60K a year, or being able to being able to like get away with saying something without being criticized, or if they do something bad, kind of like this whole thing of like, maybe you work in a certain company and you say something that's deemed kind of maybe sexist or whatever, and you're in trouble at your job, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it would be.
The more you bring that up,
it would be just the constant revolution, wouldn't it? The kind of Bolshevik type of thing.
Yeah, it's just the way that's kind of playing out. It's just kind of playing more towards a sort of a kind of authoritarian thing, whereby like you've just got these group of people who are just kind of stuck there, and they have to kind of go more and more extreme to stop people kind of rebelling against it. And so that's one of the reasons why they're bringing in hate speech laws, because they're having a bit of a backlash, and if they can stop people from speaking against them or criticizing them, then they get to keep on to their position in society longer.
Yeah. And that is going to be an issue. I think the left is very split at the moment. I see a lot of them almost coming in our direction.
By the way, just to kind of clarify, I don't mean kind of an old socialist kind of Galloway kind of left. I mean kind of
a Galloway or a Nagel or one of these kind of. Or you mean not those? Yeah.
I'm not talking about those guys. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why I think we can peel those people off as we go. And I don't know. It brings us back to the clarity on our side. We need to have that, because again, the thing we see now with like maybe this whole China virus thing or whatever is that if you're not grounded in something that's actually worked out and understood and real, then you just will be led by whichever Katie Hopkins comes along next or whatever. And a lot of that stuff always has another interest. So I do worry about that, that kind of being led by the latest piece of like trashy, I'm using the word ironically, racism, this kind of whatever stuff. It doesn't bode well to me at all. I mean, that's more or less kind of my thoughts on it tonight. Any other things to add there, Last True Gael?
No, that was really cool. Actually, I do have kind of one question as well. I remember you said you were doing a book club, and I know one of the books was Submission. And what was the other one again? I kind of forgot that one.
It was I have it ordered in the post. It's it's Anna Burns. It's called it's gone from my mind now. It's in the post. Milkman.
Oh, okay.
I think. Actually, there's, while we're at it, just for anyone who's with us here, I saw a film, because these Corona streams are I think of them as sanity streams, so they don't all have to be about politics, whatever. And I usually wouldn't just say, "Hey, what films have you been watching?" But for the time that's in it, we could do it a bit of stuff. I watched a thing recently called Awake in Fright, I think it's called, an Australian film. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No, never heard of it. No.
It's like this Australian classic. Anyway, it's called Wake and Fright. If anyone's looking for a film, you can find it on YouTube. It's pretty good. And I was gonna watch a film tonight, but it's gotten too late. I think it's called In the Mood for Love. It's a Hong Kong kind of film from 2000. It's an interesting story. I'm gonna watch that. Have you seen anything good lately?
I saw this movie. I think it's kind of been going around in the kind of meme stuff. It's called The Lighthouse. Came out last year.
Okay.
That's very, very good.
Yeah.
I still have to. I was going to see that there's this kind of, I think, the South Korean film called Parasite. That
Oh yeah, it's very good.
I haven't seen that yet, so I still have to kind of look into that one as well. I'd say.
I've seen it twice now. I downloaded it there back in the day, a few months ago, and then it came out in the cinema nearby, and I went to see it again. It's really good, actually. Definitely worth a watch. We should do. I think we should do more. I think we should do the odd review. I think films are good too because you can watch a film quickly and get it done. You know, that's what I'm realizing with books is that it's kind of a long project in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, I mean, the good thing with submission's not that long. I think submission's only about like 300 pages or something like that. But yeah, it would take longer to read something like that than say watch a movie. Like,
yeah. I think we should do more streams though because it's good. Tonight I was kind of thinking, I don't know. Sometimes just pressing record and talking it by yourself is a bit weird. You know, it's not, I'm sure you know from making your own videos. So chats are good. You know, especially now.
Yeah, I barely looked at the chat actually.
Oh no, I meant chat's good. A chat like
you
sorry,
and I.
chatting
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'm afraid to look at the chat. Like after, I feel like some people might be laying into me or whatever. We'll see. So I'll just tell everybody watching here. I have left Last True Gael's YouTube, BitChute, and Twitter in the description. Twitter, you will get some very good kind of statistics and graphs and mapping of coronavirus. Actually, before we go, tell us about Simon Harris.
Simon Harris. Oh yeah,
Didn't he say something?
That was weird as well. Like Simon Harris did a health update, and he made this random comment about like lads on Twitter modeling and trying to predict it, and how people should ignore it. And we have our own health experts, and we have our own mathematicians, and we should be following that. It was just such a weird and random comment to say, like in the midst of like a health update like that. So I wonder that someone pick up on something there. Like, you know, it's very, very bizarre.
Yeah. They're very, I saw the press conference today. They're very frightened of social media. They're like, you hear things on social media, do not listen, just come to us or whatever, which is like, you know, I thought you were all about the fourth estate and everything, lads. What happened there? It's
I mean, but, like, and it's even, I'll just leave this off before I say this before I leave off. I do kind of worry a bit that, like, you know, this hate speech law stuff might be accelerating in terms of like, not necessarily kind of hate speech, but like you're putting people's lives at danger because someone said something in a WhatsApp group. So we have to come down on that. I wonder, is that kind of a bit of a threat going forward? But I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, the rumors thing. You know, like China had its laws against rumors. I mean, look, that bridge will cross when we come to it. Again, that kind of that John Waters, Dave Cullen discourse, they've had a few videos on it recently. I mean, I largely agree with a lot of that. I have a lot of those same concerns. I'm sure you do as well, like you just said. But, you know, anyway, it's good to keep these conversations going. Hopefully we'll have more and kind of we can all, you know, enlighten ourselves a bit and learn, and steel on steel and stuff can be good too, you know. A few debates, there's no harm.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna have everybody subscribe to Last True Gael on YouTube, some really good videos over there, and BitChute as well if you're of a mind. So I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks everybody, and I'll be back tomorrow. Have a good night. Take it easy.
Cheers.
See ya.
Thank you. Sound. Bye.